Where and how do we learn to be so critical of ourselves? Well, I'm going to share a story. This is a thing that just happened to me not that long ago. I had just returned from a trip, a business trip, and I had brought some gifts for my son. It's part of a game that we like to play together. And I got in late at night and I laid out the stuff, looking forward to seeing my family. I'd been gone for a number of days, etc. And in the morning, when my son got up and I got up and we went and he saw the gifts, at first he was like, "Oh, you got stuff." And then he didn't like the way that I had laid it out. And he started to get emotional. I was tired. I also, when I arrived, hadn't slept because the dog wasn't feeling well. So I responded by saying, "Well, I bought the gifts." But he was getting more emotional and he did not like that I had set it up at all. This overwhelmed me. And so I responded and saying, "Hey, these are gifts, right? If you're going to act like this, maybe I won't bring any more gifts for you." Which, of course, sent him into a more emotional state. Now he's mad at me, right? Which then sent me to even a deeper emotional state. And my response to him was, "Well, if this is how you're going to act, if you're going to be ungrateful, maybe we'll just stop playing this game altogether." Now, why am I telling this story? I'm telling this story because my son's reaction, for whatever combination of reasons, was met with criticism and pain. I couldn't tolerate it, so I hurt him for it. That's a form of criticism, right? And I wonder, what did I teach him about being emotional? Well, for starters, I threatened to not bring gifts anymore. And secondly, I threatened him to take away one of his favorite things to do, which is to play this particular game with me. It's not my intention to do that in that moment, but I did that. And so if I do that often enough, what will happen for him is he will begin to criticize his own emotional state. In fact, I might have done that already in that interaction. I certainly hope I didn't. And I've taken steps to try to repair that. But how do you know? All right. The kinds of stuff that we're talking about don't only happen to people whose parents are completely dysregulated. Most of us who have these critical voices and who have these struggles in the world also can point to lots of really positive, wonderful experiences. We would, in fact, describe our parents as loving, caring. And nonetheless, these things happen. So there's a possibility that in that moment, there's certainly a likelihood, if that kind of thing keeps happening, that my son will develop an inner dialogue that when he starts to feel that emotion comes in and says, "Don't do that." Now let's go a little bit farther. Let's imagine that my son is growing up in the world that I grew up in which emotionality was met with boys don't cry, don't be a sissy, and all these other words that I won't repeat for this video. Now we're associating our internal states with being outside of our gender, not even being a boy, right? Boys don't do that. So then we internalize that and we now begin to criticize ourselves internally to save the outer world from hurting us, right? Cut off our own emotions, stuff them way down deep, and develop a critical voice that begins to emulate that voice that's outside that we have heard over and over again. And 15 years later, 20, 30, my case, 50 plus years later, we wonder why it is that every time there's a heightened state, it's met with some sort of internal criticism.